The wind came crawling down from the Serrano Ridge at dusk, dragging sand and heat and the faint rattle of mesquite branches across the empty horizon. Thornbrush Station, nothing more than a lopsided cabin, a silent well, and an abandoned coach post stood alone under the bruised sky. And in that cabin lived Elara Wynn, a 30-year-old woman who carried silence like a second skin. People in the nearest town spoke of her in whispers, not cruel whispers, but cautious ones. "She's a single mom," they'd say, though nobody saw a child and nobody dared ask. "Keeps to herself. Works her land alone. Doesn't trust strangers." They were right about the last part. After what she had survived, trust was a currency she no longer traded. Elara was fastening the shutters when she heard hoofbeats, a slow, deliberate cadence. Hoofbeats like a warning. She froze. Travelers rarely passed this way. Riders almost never did. And the ones who came usually wanted something she had no interest in giving: her supplies, her safety, or her solitude. She stepped outside, her rifle held low but ready. Across the yard, the shadows drew themselves together into a human shape, a tall, broad-shouldered figure astride a dark bay horse. As he dismounted, light broke across him, revealing Tahu Blackthorn, an Apache warrior known in hushed circuits of rumor. A man exiled from his own band. A man said to be mean, silent, and colder than the iron barrel of a winter rifle. A man believed to seek no company and offer none. Elara had heard those same rumors, and she had prayed she'd never have to test their truth. The warrior stepped closer, his long black hair shifting like river shadow in the last light, his expression unreadable. His presence filled the empty station as though he had always belonged there and everything else had trespassed. "Evening," he said, voice low but steady. "Storm's coming." Elara's fingers tightened on the rifle. "Ride through it." His dark, storm-lit eyes rested on her. "My horse is collapsing. Needs water, shelter, no." Her voice was flat as river rock. "Please don't come inside. Take water from the well and go." A long silence spread between them, tense and taut. The horse behind him did look exhausted, foam drying on its flanks, head low, sides shivering. But Elara had survived too much to let pity override fear. Tahu studied her with a grim patience, not anger exactly, but the sharp-edged awareness of a man unused to being refused. "I don't want trouble," he said quietly. "And I don't want company," she replied. "Especially not tonight." His jaw tensed. Not aggressive controlled, as if he were fighting against some instinct to push past her words. His loneliness had edges. His silence held weight. This was not a man who came to doors by accident. He untied the reins, leading his horse toward the well without looking at her again. Every step he took looked heavy with something unsaid. Elara watched from the doorway, still guarding it like a battlement. She strained to listen for other riders, bandits, scouts, anyone who might be using him as bait. Nothing but wind and the absence of stars. Tahu let his horse drink, then filled his hands with water for himself. The way he cupped the water, slow, respectful, reverent, was at odds with every rumor she had heard about him being mean and merciless. But she stayed where she was. The rifle stayed where it was. When he finished, he turned toward her again. "Thank you," he said simply. "Now leave." He stepped closer, stopping just shy of her porch. Close enough that she could see the fatigue pulling at the corners of his eyes, the faint tremor in his hands, the blood staining the side of his shirt. "A wound? Someone was chasing you?" she asked before she could swallow the question. "No." His voice was a stone dropped into deep water. "Someone was trying to kill me." Her heartbeat stuttered, and for the first time, the mean, lonely Apache warrior allowed a crack in his silence. "Elara Wynn," he said, as if he'd known her name long before this night. "I didn't come here by accident." She stepped back despite herself. "Why are you here?" Under the dying sun, his answer was almost a whisper. "To warn you." The wind stopped. The world held its breath. And Thornbrush Station would never be quiet again. The sky cracked open just as Tahu Blackthorn uttered those 3 words. To warn you. A low growl of thunder rolled across the valley, shaking dust from the rafters of Elara's porch. She steadied the rifle, but her resolve wavered for the first time tonight. "You know my name," Elara said. "How?" Tahu's gaze swept the horizon before answering, as though mapping dangers only he could see. "I've been following tracks, signs, smoke from your chimney." He paused. "And stories. I don't care for stories." Her voice hardened again, trying to reclaim the distance he'd pierced. "Say what you came to say and then ride." He shook his head once, not in refusal, but in something heavier. "If I ride now, you die tonight." A sharp chill crawled across her spine despite the heat. "Explain." Tahu stepped closer, but still respected her line on the threshold. The storm's shadow accented his features' strong cheekbones, jaw set like carved stone, long hair pulled by the wind like black fire. His chest rose and fell with fatigue, but his eyes were clear, alert, ready. "There's a group of riders," he said. 5 men, drifters, call themselves the Latchkey Gang. Elara's grip tightened. She'd heard the name. Everyone this side of the ridge had. Robbers with no allegiance, no mercy, and no pattern. They burned what they didn't take and killed what they couldn't use. "They ambushed me south of the canyon," he continued. "Wanted my horse, my gear, my life." He touched the blood on his side. "I got away, barely. And now they're following you?" Elara asked. "Not following." His voice dropped, carrying a gravity that left no room for doubt. "Hunting." Elara's breath hitched. "Then keep riding. Don't bring them here." He looked at her, expression unreadable but firm. "They saw where I turned. They know this station exists. They would have come whether I was here or not." Thunder cracked again, closer this time. Elara scanned the darkening horizon. Nothing moved yet, but she knew how fast men could materialize from emptiness. "So you're telling me," she said slowly, "that I'm already in danger?" "Yes, and you brought that danger to my doorstep." His jaw tightened. "I brought warning." "And help? Help?" She gave a bitter laugh. "You want me to trust the same man people say is cruel, vicious, and heartless?" Tahu didn't flinch. "People say what they fear. And should I fear you, Tahu Blackthorn?" Lightning split the sky, illuminating him in raw, stark, light, muscular frame. Tribal jewelry glinting, hair wild, eyes sharp with something that was not cruelty but history. Hard history. "No," he said. "But you should fear what's coming." Her pulse skittered. She stood in the doorway like a woman standing on the edge of 2 fates, one inside, one outside, neither safe. Elara had built a life here, a fortress of isolation, of rules, of distance. Rule 1, never let a stranger in. Rule 2, never believe a man's intentions. Rule 3, never rely on anyone but yourself. But Tahu's presence pressed against those rules like a storm against thin glass. "How long before they get here?" she asked. He looked over the desert, reading it like a page. "An hour, maybe less." Elara's throat tightened. Her cabin was sturdy but not fortified for 5 armed men. Tahu, wounded and exhausted, was in no shape to fight them alone. And she, despite all her practiced stubbornness, would be killed before sunrise if she faced them without help. "You said you didn't come here by accident." Her tone was cautious, but not as cold. "What does that mean?" Tahu hesitated. the first hesitation she'd seen in him. "There's something you need to know about the Latchkey Gang," he said. "Something most don't. Say it. They're after more than horses and money." His voice grew rough, dark with memory. "They're after survivors." "Survivors of what?" "Of the fire at Marrow Creek." Elara felt her bones turn to sand. Marrow Creek, her past. The place she never spoke of. No one alive knew she had been there. No one, except now. This Apache warrior who had shown up at her door wounded, hunted, and carrying truth no stranger should know. Her voice barely formed the question as thunder trembled again. "How do you know about Marrow Creek, Tahu?" The storm began to fall, and the answer he gave would change everything. Rain began to fall in uneven strokes, soft at first, then sharpened by the rising storm. Elara Wynn stood frozen in the doorway, rifle still raised though her hands trembled. Tahu Blackthorn's face, half lit by the shuddering lantern behind her, held a look she couldn't decipher. Not sympathy. Not pity. Something deeper, older, shaped by scars she couldn't see. "How do you know about Marrow Creek?" Elara repeated, voice low, strained. Tahu stepped back slightly, giving her space. Respectful, not retreating. "Because I was there," he said. "On the ridge above it." Her breath caught painfully. Lightning illuminated his features again, rain sliding down his bare chest, tribal jewelry trembling against his skin. He didn't look proud or defiant. He looked haunted. "You saw what happened?" she asked, her throat tightening. "I saw everything," he answered. From the first ember to the last scream. The wind tore through the mesquite nearby, as though reacting to the very memory. Elara's grip on the rifle loosened not because she trusted him, but because her strength began to drain under the weight of what she'd kept locked away. She had spent years burying the past, burying Marrow Creek, burying the woman she had been when the fire swallowed everything. Her voice cracked. "Why didn't you help?" Tahu's eyes hardened, not with anger at her, but at himself. "I did, but not enough. I saved the ones I could, 3 cowhands trapped by the creek bed. A woman who collapsed near the oak line. But the smoke, the flames, I could not reach everyone." Elara stared at him as rain painted dark streaks across the yard. "Then why seek me out now? After all these years?" "Because the ones who set that fire," he said slowly, "are the same men coming here tonight." The world tilted under her feet. A sharp, hollow ache spread through her chest. "The Latchkey Gang," she whispered. Tahu nodded once. "Same riders. Same cruelty. Same hunger to erase witnesses." "I was never a witness," Elara said, shaking her head. "I was just a woman trying to rebuild her life." He studied her in a way that made her feel seen, truly seen, perhaps for the first time in years. "You survived the worst fire this land has known. That makes you more than a witness. It makes you a threat to men who depend on fear." Elara lowered the rifle at last, her arm stiff from holding it so long. Her voice softened despite her resistance. "Tahu? Why tell me this? Why put yourself between me and them?" His expression shifted again, this time something she couldn't label. A quiet ache. A hard truth. A confession buried beneath years of silence. "I owe a debt," he said. "To me?" she asked. "No." His eyes held hers with unwavering intensity. "To the man who died protecting you." Elara's heart stopped. A memory slammed into her last glimpse of the burning town. A man pushing her out through the smoke. His hands on her shoulders. His final words swallowed by flame. She had never known who he was. A stranger. A ghost with a face she couldn't recall through the haze. "You knew him?" she asked in a whisper. Tahu nodded. "He was one of ours. A scout from my band. He saw you run into the blaze for someone." Elara's breath shuddered. Don't. The old wound ripped open again. The one she never spoke of. The reason she lived in the middle of nowhere with no one to understand her grief. Tahu's voice softened. He believed you worth saving, even when others didn't. Elara swallowed hard, fighting tears she refused to show. She turned away, stepping fully into the cabin, not opening the door for him, but not closing it either. She placed the rifle on the table. Her hands shook too much to hold it. Outside, thunder rolled like distant drums. Tahu remained on the porch, rain soaking him, but he didn't force entry. Didn't demand anything. Just stood as a sentinel, wounded yet resolute. After a long silence, she spoke. 5 men, she said. Armed, ruthless, and you're hurt. I'll manage, he answered. You'll die if you face them alone. He didn't deny it. Finally, slowly, Elara did what she swore she would never do again. She opened the door wider. Come inside, she said, her voice barely above the storm. But only so we can survive what's coming. Tahu stepped over the threshold, silent, steady, dangerous, and strangely human. The storm swallowed the night. And inside Thornbrush Station, 2 broken pasts collided, preparing for a battle neither could outrun. The late afternoon sun hung low over the jagged hills surrounding Elara Wynn's small homestead, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch like fingers over the dry earth. The wind carried the faint scent of sagebrush and smoke from a distant campfire, and Elara's hands, calloused from tending her small fields, trembled slightly as she stood on the porch. She had grown accustomed to solitude, to the silence that clung to her home like a protective shroud. And yet, despite her careful routines, she felt eyes on her, watchful, persistent. Tahu Blackthorn had been following her, silently, for days. Elara knew he was near before she ever saw him, because the air itself seemed to change when he approached. There was a weight to his presence, a primal tension that made the hair on the back of her neck stand. She had tried to warn him once, to demand that he respect her boundaries. Please don't come inside, she had said, her voice trembling but firm. But Tahu Blackthorn had never listened, not with words, not with his imposing, brooding silence. He wanted something from her, though she could not yet name what it was. Love? Protection? Redemption? Perhaps all 3, tangled together in the complexities of his heart. Today, he came closer than ever. Elara's chest tightened as she watched him emerge from the line of rocks near the creek, the sunlight glinting off the bronze tones of his skin and the dark, flowing strands of his hair. He was shirtless, the sunlight tracing the contours of muscles honed by years of survival, his eyes sharp and unyielding beneath the shadow of his brow. Tribal necklaces clinked softly as he moved, a rhythmic accompaniment to his steady stride. His gaze locked on hers, and she felt an inexplicable pull, a mix of fear and fascination that made her heart hammer. I won't come closer, he said finally. His voice low, resonant, carrying the weight of storms and quiet rivers alike. There was a strange vulnerability hidden beneath the intensity, a hint of respect that made her want to hate him. And yet, she couldn't. I only want to speak. Elara drew a deep breath and stepped down from the porch. The ground beneath her boots was hard and cracked, evidence of the dry season, but she moved with determination. Then speak, she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. But I warn you, Tahu, I will not invite you inside. My life, my rules. You will not cross them. Tahu's lips curved faintly, almost imperceptibly, into a shadow of a smile. He stopped a few yards away, crouching slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. I do not seek to cross anything, he said. I only wish to understand. You live like the wind, Elara untouchable, relentless. But even the wind leaves traces. I have followed yours. Elara's pulse raced. His words were unsettlingly precise, like he could see the hidden paths of her life, the secret scars she tried to bury. She turned her gaze away, focusing on the distant hills, trying to ground herself. I survive. That is all. Nothing more. You should leave before nightfall. But Tahu Blackthorn remained. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he knelt and drew a small circle in the dirt with a finger. Symbols she didn't recognize, yet somehow felt familiar, resonating deep in her chest. I mean you no harm, he whispered. I am bound by the same winds that protect you. But the world grows darker, Elara, and even the fiercest of hearts can stumble. Her lips parted, the words caught in her throat. Part of her screamed to retreat, to slam the door and hide in the shadows of her home. But another part, a quieter, dangerous part, was curious, drawn to him, to the mystery he carried. And if I allow you to stay, she said finally, her voice trembling, what then? Do you claim to tame me? Or to follow me into ruin? Tahu stood, the setting sun casting a halo around him, accentuating the strength in his bare arms and the steadfastness in his gaze. Neither, he said simply. I only offer what I can give, protection, truth, and the choice. The choice is always yours. For a long moment, Elara felt the weight of his words settle over her. She had spent years building walls, fortifying her life against intruders, against danger, against love. And yet, here he was, a storm wrapped in human form, unrelenting and unwavering. And for the first time in a long time, she felt the stirrings of something dangerous, something alive. She stepped back toward her porch, the wind tugging at her hair, the dust curling around her boots. Then speak, she said again, her voice steadier now. But remember, inside is mine, not yours. Tahu Blackthorn's eyes glimmered, a dark promise in their depths, as he settled at the edge of her land. Then I will stay, he said, and wait. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire and blood. And as the first stars appeared, Elara realized that the world she had carefully guarded might never be the same again. Night had settled like a heavy velvet curtain over the valley, and the stars blinked cold and distant above Elara Wynn's homestead. Inside, the warm glow of lantern light threw shadows across the wooden walls, yet the house felt emptier than ever. The air outside carried the scent of dry grass and sage, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote's howl echoed against the rugged hills. Elara's hands trembled slightly as she prepared her modest evening meal, each movement careful, precise. Her mind, however, was elsewhere, wandering to the silent figure that waited outside. Tahu Blackthorn remained near the edge of her land, a sentinel in the moonlight. Elara had tried to push him away, tried to convince herself that his presence was unwelcome, yet he had stayed. And she could not deny the strange magnetic pull she felt toward him, a mixture of fear, curiosity, and something more complicated, something she had long suppressed. She had spent her life fending off men, fending off attachment, and yet Tahu was different. He was not like the others who had come and gone, leaving only disappointment in their wake. He was relentless, like the wind over the cliffs, and impossible to ignore. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft creak of the front door. She turned, expecting the empty hallway, but her heart skipped when she saw the shadow move near the edge of the light. Tahu had approached closer than ever, his silhouette framed by the moon. His long black hair fell in waves around his face, and his bare chest gleamed faintly in the soft light, the tribal necklaces clinking softly with each subtle movement. Every step he took seemed deliberate, measured, like he was attuned to some rhythm only he could hear. "Elara," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken emotions, "I know you fear me. I know the walls you've built around yourself. But I am not here to break them. I only seek to stand beside them, if you will allow it." Elara's hands tightened around the dish towel. She wanted to shout, to slam the door, to make him go away. "Tahu," she said, her voice firm though her heart betrayed her. "I warned you. I will not invite anyone into my home. You need to understand that." He stepped closer, yet still stopped a few feet away, respecting her boundary. "I do understand," he replied, eyes dark and unwavering. "And I will wait. Outside, if I must. But you do not have to face the night alone. You have never truly been alone, Elara, even if you thought so." Her breath caught. How could he see so clearly? How could he understand the hidden layers of fear, grief, and defiance that defined her? She had spent years hiding, surviving, living only for herself, and now here he was a storm in human form, refusing to be ignored. The night deepened, and Tahu lowered himself to sit cross-legged on the cool earth, a respectful distance away. He was silent for a long while, his gaze fixed on the distant hills, yet she felt his attention like a tether pulling at her soul. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he spoke again. "The world is changing, Elara. Shadows gather where light once ruled. And sometimes the strongest among us are forced to lean on others, not for weakness, but for strength." Elara felt an unfamiliar ache in her chest, a crack in the armor she had built. She moved to the door, hesitated, then opened it a fraction, enough for the cool night air to brush against her face. Tahu's eyes met hers, patient, unwavering. "I am not asking for more than you can give," he said. "Only the truth of your heart, if ever you find the courage to share it." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of sage and earth, mingling with the faint trace of smoke from distant fires. Elara swallowed, feeling the tension in her chest ease slightly. There was danger in letting him in, danger in allowing herself to acknowledge the feelings she had denied for so long. But there was also a strange comfort, a sense of possibility that she had not felt in years. She pulled the door wider, the faint creak echoing in the night. "You may stay," she said finally, her voice steady but soft, but not inside. "If you want to be here, it is only on the land, under the stars. That is the limit." Tahu's lips curved into a small, approving smile, and he nodded once, as if honoring a sacred pact. "I will stay," he said simply, "and I will wait for you until the night ends and the dawn brings what it will." The stars blinked overhead, silent witnesses to the unspoken bond forming between them. And as the wind rustled through the grass, Elara realized that perhaps she had been wrong to fear him. Perhaps, for the first time in a long while, she could trust someone without losing herself. The night stretched on, quiet but full of tension, and the promise of something greater lingered just beyond the horizon. The morning sun rose pale and hesitant over the horizon, spilling golden light across Elara Wynn's homestead. The chill of dawn clung to the air, and a thin layer of frost glimmered on the edges of her small garden. Elara moved with careful precision, her hands brushing over the soil as she tended her crops, though her mind was far from the simple rhythm of daily chores. She felt the presence before she saw it, a familiar weight in the air, a tension that made her pulse quicken. Tahu Blackthorn stood at the far edge of the property, shirtless, his muscular frame outlined by the rising sun. His long black hair caught the light, glinting like dark silk, and the tribal jewelry around his neck and arms clinked softly with each subtle movement. He observed her with that same intense, unwavering gaze, a mixture of patience, curiosity, and something deeper that she still could not define. He had respected her boundaries all night, waiting under the stars without crossing the invisible line she had drawn. And yet his presence felt inescapable. Elara straightened, wiping her hands on a cloth. "Tahu," she said, her voice steady, though the tension in her chest betrayed her, "you do not need to follow me at every turn. I can manage the land myself." He stepped forward slowly, careful to remain respectful of the distance she had insisted upon. "I do not wish to intrude," he said, his deep voice carrying over the crisp morning air. "But I worry for you. The land is harsh, and the world beyond it harsher. I can offer what I can: strength, protection, guidance. Nothing more, unless you choose it." Elara's heart tightened at the words. He had been patient, persistent, and strangely gentle. Yet he carried an unshakable force within him, like the unrelenting wind over the mesas. There was a wildness in him that both unsettled and fascinated her, a reminder of everything she had tried to leave behind: danger, passion, unpredictability. And still, she could not deny the pull he had over her, a magnetism that defied reason and caution alike. "I don't know if I can trust anyone anymore," she admitted softly, her voice barely carrying over the morning breeze. "Not after everything I've endured. You're different, Tahu, but different doesn't always mean safe." Tahu's gaze softened, though it did not lose its intensity. He knelt on one knee, a gesture both humble and commanding, the sunlight catching on his bronzed skin and the curves of his muscles. "Safety is not always the measure of life, Elara," he said quietly. "Sometimes it is risk and courage and the willingness to face what we fear. I do not ask for blind trust, only for patience and the chance to prove that my intentions are true." Elara looked away, focusing on the distant hills where the wind bent the tall grasses in waves. She wanted to resist, to retreat, but the ache in her chest, the longing she had buried for years, made her falter. There was something in him, something unyielding yet steady, that stirred feelings she had not allowed herself to feel. Love? Respect? Perhaps both, intertwined in ways she did not yet understand. Hours passed as she worked, Tahu moving silently nearby, tending the land in his own way, yet never overstepping. It was a strange dance, one of shared labor and unspoken words, until the sun climbed high enough to burn away the morning frost. Sweat glistened on Tahu's bare chest, and his presence was magnetic, commanding her attention even as she tried to focus on her work. She could feel his eyes on her, not in a predatory way, but with a quiet, unwavering intensity that made her pulse race. At last, she stopped, wiping her hands and turning fully toward him. "Why do you persist?" she asked, her voice low but edged with curiosity. "Why follow me, Tahu? What do you truly want from me?" He stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking by inches, yet still respecting her boundaries. His voice was steady, filled with conviction. "I want nothing that is not freely given. I want only to be near you, to offer what I can, to stand by you. You do not have to answer my heart, Elara. Only acknowledge it if you can. That is enough for now." For a long moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the whisper of the wind through the tall grasses and the distant cry of a hawk. Elara felt the weight of his words settle over her, a promise and a challenge all at once. She realized that perhaps the world she had built for herself, so guarded, so solitary, was not enough anymore. Perhaps it had never been enough. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. "Then we shall see," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "how this grows." Tahu's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, and the sun's rays glinted off his tribal necklaces as he bowed his head slightly, honoring her words. The day stretched ahead, filled with labor, sun, and unspoken possibilities. And for the first time in years, Elara felt the stirring of hope, a fragile yet undeniable light breaking through the shadows of her carefully guarded heart. The evening sky was painted in shades of fire and violet as the sun sank behind the jagged cliffs surrounding Elara Wynn's homestead. A soft wind whispered through the tall grasses, carrying the scent of sage and earth, and Elara stood at the edge of her porch, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Tonight, the tension she had carried for weeks between fear and longing, solitude and connection, felt heavier than ever. She knew Tahu Blackthorn was waiting, as he always had. his presence a steady force in her life even when she tried to deny it. Tahu emerged from the shadowed line of rocks near the creek, his bare chest glistening faintly in the fading light. The tribal jewelry adorning his arms and neck shimmered with every movement, a testament to his heritage and strength. His long black hair blew slightly in the breeze, framing a face that held both intensity and a strange gentleness she could never fully comprehend. He stopped a few feet from her, eyes locked onto hers with that unyielding focus that made her pulse quicken. "Elara," he said softly, his voice carrying over the rustling grass, "the time has come to stop standing apart. You have endured enough, carried too much alone. You do not have to face the night or the world without someone by your side." Elara's hands trembled as she clenched them at her sides. She had spent years guarding her heart, fortifying her life against intrusion, and yet here he was relentless, patient, and unwavering. "Tahu," she whispered, "I don't know if I'm ready. I've built walls too high, too strong. I can't—" "You can," he interrupted gently, taking a slow step closer, careful not to overstep. "You are stronger than you realize, Elara, but even the strongest hearts need connection, need someone who sees them truly. I see you, all of you, the fear, the pain, the courage. And I will stand with you if you allow it." The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of smoke from distant fires and the earthy aroma of the land she had cultivated with her own hands. Elara's gaze fell to the ground, her chest tight with emotion. She had long feared vulnerability, yet Tahu's presence demanded something impossible to resist. "And if I allow this," she said, her voice soft, trembling, "what happens to us? To my life?" Tahu's expression softened, almost imperceptibly, as he reached out a hand, not to claim, but to offer. "We live it," he said simply. "We face it together. Whatever comes, we face it side by side. You do not have to give me more than that, and you will never lose yourself in me. Only strength, partnership, and trust." Elara hesitated, the weight of his words settling over her like the warmth of a long-lost sun. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she extended her hand toward his. Their fingers brushed, tentative at first, then firm. And a warmth spread through her chest that made her forget her fears. Even if just for a moment, the wind swirled around them, lifting Tahu's hair, tugging at the feathers and beads of his tribal jewelry. He stepped closer, still respectful, and she felt the undeniable pull of his strength and presence. He was no longer just a figure at the edge of her land, he was part of her reality, a force she could not ignore and no longer wanted to. "I've waited for this," Tahu murmured, his voice low, almost reverent. "Not to possess you, Elara, but to stand with you, to be the one who does not turn away when others have. I've waited because you are worth every moment, every step, every challenge." Elara's eyes glistened with unshed tears, her chest rising and falling as emotion and relief collided. I've been so afraid," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "Afraid of being hurt, of losing myself, of trusting someone again." Tahu lifted her chin gently, his eyes soft but unwavering. "You will not lose yourself. You will only gain strength, courage, and me. And I will never leave, not unless you ask me to." For the first time in years, Elara allowed herself to breathe freely. The walls she had built around her heart did not crumble. They softened, just enough for something new, something real, to grow. Slowly, deliberately, she leaned into him, feeling the heat of his body and the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, grounding her, offering both protection and presence. The sky darkened, the stars blinking into existence one by one, silent witnesses to a bond forged in patience, trust, and undeniable attraction. And as they stood there together under the vast expanse of the Old West night, Elara realized something she had never allowed herself to hope for. She was no longer alone. Tahu Blackthorn, warrior and storm, was not just at the edge of her life, he was part of it now. And for the first time, the future did not feel frightening. It felt possible. Under the blanket of stars, they remained, side by side, the quiet of the night surrounding them, carrying the promise of love, strength, and a shared life yet to come. The winds of the desert whispered their secrets, but tonight, Elara Wynn and Tahu Blackthorn had found one certainty. Together, they could face whatever the world might throw at them. The night stretched on, peaceful yet electric, and in that stillness, a new chapter began, one forged from courage, trust, and the undeniable pull of hearts finally allowed to collide.